Greetings once again, my friends, and live from Retro Central. My name is Peter, and welcome back to Consolation. As always, I thank you very much for taking the time to check out my work today. I really do appreciate it. 1999 for me was a pretty special year in terms of video games, in terms of my personal life, and my professional life. In my personal life, I moved into my first apartment with my fiance. Before then, I was either living with family or I'd lived with roommates. So this was really part of growing up, as you might say. And then I got married in October of 1999. Marriage that would only last about 5 years, unfortunately, but still was a sign that despite the fact that I refused to grow up, I was growing up anyway. In my professional life, I was promoted from assistant manager at Funcoland to getting my own store as a store manager. That was a big deal. I might have taken on a bit too much responsibility too quickly, but I don't regret the time that I spent with the company in that particular role. I learned a lot of things. I can't tell you how neat it was to be the boss at a video game store. I know now there's a lot of extraneous stuff that goes on, but back then we didn't have as much of the responsibility as we do now working in video game stores where there are all kinds of crazy counts and promotions and other things. Back in 1999, it was mostly sales, and I loved that. I loved talking to customers. I loved working with my employees. I loved giving them all of the knowledge that they needed to be able to sell games to customers that came in the door. And I miss those days. But 1999 in Funcoland, that was one of the highlights of my professional life and something I miss very much. In video games, it was a very special year as well, highlighted, of course, by the release of the Sega Dreamcast on September 9th. A system along with games and accessories that I dropped more than $700 on at midnight on September 9th. A system that I loved up until it was canned in January of 2001, but that's a video for another time. I know I need to add a Dreamcast to my retro library, and I'm working on that because I'd like to do a video about it and talk about the system at length. But for me, one of the highlights, if not the highlight of 1999 in terms of video games, is this guy right here. Tony Hawk's Pro Skater, published by Activision and developed by Neversoft Entertainment, released in late August, early September of 1999. This game resonates with me like no other skateboarding game around. At least the series does. As far as my favorite in the series, we'll get to that in a little bit. But this particular game, the amount of hours that I've put into it between demos and playing the actual game itself, yeah, countless hours. I played the demo at the store all the time when I was working and there was no one in the store. I would put in a quick run in the warehouse level, or the Chicago level, to see if I could beat my scores or beat an employee's scores. When I was home, I would play it when I had a half an hour or an hour to spare to just try and set more scores. Or when I got the game to try and progress through the career mode as quickly as possible. Such an addictive game, that arcade feel, that score-chasing feel that I loved so much, combined with skateboarding, which I liked, but I can't do in real life because, let's face it, I'm not coordinated. Putting four wheels under me, unless it's a car, is a trip to the emergency room guaranteed. Whether we're talking about a skateboard, roller skates, yeah, forget it. I'm going to fall down and I'm going to hurt something. But skateboarding in a video game, if you get hurt, you don't hurt yourself in real life, so it works out well. I've always had a thing for skateboarding video games, to be honest. Tony Hawk wasn't the first. I could go back to my days with the Commodore 64. This is the NES version right here, but Skate or Die was a game that I had during the Commodore 64 days, and a game that I enjoyed very much. California Games had a skateboarding section in it as well, and I enjoyed that. This is the NES version ported by Rare. And then, of course, there was 720 Degrees from Atari Games and arcades with the crazy joystick that envelops this big circle. Not a game that I'm very good at, even to this day, but still very important in terms of skateboarding games. And I do play it a bit more now in the Midway Arcade Treasures collection. Then in 1997, Sega released an arcade game called Top Skater, which had a skateboard controller, an analog skateboard controller, where you could sway left and right to be able to move your on-screen skater, and then if you kicked the tail when you were going over a jump, you could pull off some crazy tricks based on how fast you were going. The graphics were great. The soundtrack was phenomenal. I never knew about Pennywise before that game, and I became a fan afterwards. I don't want to talk about on camera how many tokens I put in the Top Skater in any arcade that I could find. Needless to say, it's a lot. But we never got a home version of Top Skater. The closest we ever got was this game right here. This is Street Skater, which was developed by Microcabin and published by Electronic Arts in the middle of 1999. This game I played the crap out of, and I still play it a lot to this day. Very arcade-like in its approach. Not a lot of depth, doesn't take long to play all the way through and beat, but still an enjoyable game to play through. This is one of those PlayStation games you can take the disc out and play it in your car or in any CD player, so you can check out the soundtrack. Just a lot of fun to play, and if you can find it for cheap, I really do recommend it for your PlayStation collection. But it was August, September 1999 when this guy came out, especially the demo. As I talked about, any free time that I could get to play the demo, I absolutely did. And that's one of those times when the demo unquestionably sold me on the final product. I had to have this game when it came out. Bought it on launch day, played the hell out of it up until the Dreamcast came out. And then, honestly, I still played the game a lot even after the Dreamcast was around. While I did love the Dreamcast at that point, and it was certainly my top priority, my PlayStation still got a lot of play. Then came 2000, and Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2, which is this guy right here. Absolutely fantastic sequel, introduced the manual mechanics, something that I really didn't grasp too well until games that came out later. Another excellent soundtrack, great follow-up. You could have your own skater in the game, which was cool. I always developed my own person, and you could build your own skate park as well. Something that I haven't dabbled with because I'm not very creative when it comes to that kind of thing, but still a lot of fun to play. Interesting story about Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2 is that Chrono Cross came out on the same day, so I got both games. So here they are. I got both games. I played this for about a half an hour, and then I left it. And this game wound up getting almost all of my play in the fall of 2000. That's how good a game that is, that it kicked Square Enix to the curb despite Square having such a phenomenal year 2000, and something I'll get into in a future video. So Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2, according to a lot of people, the best game in the series. A lot of people, but not me. Nope. My favorite game in the series is this guy right here. Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3, released for the PlayStation 2 in 2001. Imagine Tony Hawk's Pro Skater goodness, but bumped up from 30 frames a second, which you see on the PlayStation here, to 60 frames a second on the PlayStation 2. Better graphics, a more extensive soundtrack, bringing over a lot of the features that were cool from Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2, and adding what I consider to be one of the most important mechanics in a Tony Hawk's Pro Skater game, which is the revert. Because I'm a vert skater, I like to pull off a lot of tricks inside of half pipes. Having that revert to kind of link tricks and create incredibly long trick lines was a very, very, very cool addition, and one that I think can't be understated. And that's what makes this game my favorite in this series, and is certainly worth getting if you have a PS2 kicking around. Now, if you don't, and you only have a PlayStation, fear not. There is a version of Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3, which was developed for the PlayStation by a company called Shaba Games. Now, who is Shaba Games, you may ask? Well, if you've heard of a game called Grind Session, which was released by Sony Computer Entertainment of America back in 2000, you'd know who Shaba Games is. They developed this Tony Hawk's Pro Skater clone and wound up developing this port of the PlayStation 2 game for the original PlayStation. So there's a bit of trivia for you. I aim to please, I aim to make you a little more knowledgeable. Hopefully it helped. Then came Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 4 in 2002, a game that I'm not the biggest fan of because it changed too much of the Tony Hawk's Pro Skater formula that I really enjoyed. Implementing an open world formula is something that I never really approved of. I didn't like it. I played the game and I finished it, but it's something I struggled with because it felt too different. Maybe it's because I'm a Taurus and I'm stubborn and I like things the same, the way they are. Don't break what isn't broken, or don't fix what isn't broken. But this game does that. It tries to fix things that to me weren't broken. Still a great looking game, another great soundtrack, although not quite as many big name bands as in past games, but that's okay. And if you like open world gameplay, then there's plenty of stuff to do here. And yes, there was a version of Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 4. That's this guy right here for the original PlayStation. This one was developed by Vicarious Visions, who also did the Tony Hawk games for the Nintendo DS, which are absolutely fantastic, and you should pick them up if you can. This game does struggle. I think Vicarious Visions kind of tried to do what they could with the very old PlayStation hardware at that point. It's tough to play because the frame rate does chug so very much. But still, it's noteworthy and it's noble that Vicarious Visions took the PlayStation 2 game and was able to, at least in many ways, put it on the original PlayStation and make it work. It's just difficult to play. After that came the Tony Hawk's Underground games. I don't have a case for the original Underground. I need to get one. This is Tony Hawk's Underground 2. These games, rather than straight-up career modes, had a storyline where you put yourself in the game, you created your own skater, and you could skate alongside Tony Hawk and the rest of the professionals, which I thought was a really cool idea. Still open world, which is not something I was crazy about, but I learned to live with. I was a bigger fan, and still am, of Underground 2 because of the inclusion of Bam Margera and that whole jackass motif. I know that probably makes me a little immature, but it is what it is. Plus, there's a Boston level in this game, and being a native New Englander, any game that has a Boston or otherwise New England level in it rocks. Hello, Fallout 4. That's true. Then came American Wasteland, which is this guy right here. A game that promoted no loading times, but managed to accomplish that by linking very long tunnels between the areas of the game. So while the game was loading assets, you could pull off tricks and stuff, but it really didn't amount to very much. Not a bad game. I haven't beaten this game. This was the first of the Tony Hawk games that I hadn't beaten, and I do need to go back to it and try to get through it at some point when I get some downtime. Here is Tony Hawk's Project 8, which was the first, not the first really, but the first Tony Hawk game that was developed with next gen in mind, the 360 and the PS3 in mind, and this was the last gen port. This developed by Shaba Games again, and this was from 2006. I haven't played this a lot, so I can't comment on it, but I got this more for completion purposes. And here is Tony Hawk's Proving Ground, which was developed by, looks like Project 44. The logo looks familiar. If I'm right, this is the same team that developed the Gretzky games for 989 Studios. I'd have to double check that to be sure. Not really a big fan of this because of the forced course building that is in the game. You know, you have to put a ramp here, you have to put this there. Again, I'm not the most creative person. Create a park modes have never been my strength, have never been an interest of mine. So forcing me to do it as part of the game is something that I didn't really appreciate very much. I know that I'm missing Tony Hawk's Downhill Jam. I need to get that at some point, and that will wrap up my retro Tony Hawk library. The Tony Hawk series is one of my favorites of all time, and I'm very happy that we're going to be getting another Tony Hawk's Pro Skater game, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 5, developed by my friends at Robomoto. And I know that a lot of people like to poo-poo that company. I wish I could make you change your mind, but it's going to be up to what Robomoto does with the game to impress those of you who aren't impressed. All I'm going to tell you is I trust the team there. I know the guy who spearheads the team, and he is an arcade guy like I am. He has a very intense passion not only for arcade gaming, but also for skateboarding. And you need to give him a chance. At least that's my plea. Give it a chance. Not saying you have to rush right out and buy it on launch day, but have an open mind, and I think you might be surprised. I know that I'm looking forward to it when I get a little bit of extra money. Unfortunately, it's coming out around the same time that Retro World Expo is happening, which means that money's going to be a little bit tight until the middle of October, but that is what it is. I will be getting it, there's no question, because it's a Tony Hawk game, and that's what I do. I'm a big Tony Hawk fan and will continue to be until my hands stop working. Do you have a favorite Tony Hawk game? I'd like to hear about it in the comments if you do. Perhaps you're not a skateboarding fan at all, and in that case, I'm sure you probably didn't make it this far in the video. But I'd like to hear your responses to Tony Hawk or to skateboarding games in general. Maybe you're a big Top Skater fan, or maybe there were other skateboarding games like Skate or Die that you really liked. Like to hear from you in the comments. Just say hey if you'd like. I'll be back with a new Consolation video next week. In the meantime, as always, thank you very much for checking out Consolation. Again, I really do appreciate it. Be sure to check out RetroWorldExpo.com if you haven't bought your tickets yet for the show. It is October 3rd in Wallingford, Connecticut. Your chance to meet me as well as a bunch of other people that are way more talented than I am. I hope to see you there. Until the next time, my friends, take care.